I had the privilege of getting to meet Bert, the 4-year-old male umbrella cockatoo who was new to Melissa's home. She had me come out for an in-home after several online consultations, kind of working through some initial stuff with diet. I went out to her home for a 2-day in-home consultation where we got to work through things like learning cockatoo body language. This was her first big bird. We also got to work through step up, and we got to work through a bit of a biting situation. The theme of this consultation really was teaching a species that's already so incredibly hard to motivate how to train and establish that communication bond between the human and the bird. So at the time of this consultation, Bert was converted onto BirdTricks pellets, but he wasn't quite interested in chop yet. So that was something that we were sort of having to still toy with. And he really didn't care about any treats. Bert, hi. Cockatoos are notoriously hard to motivate anyway, and the fact that he wasn't really interested in mini treats made it particularly challenging for Melissa. The one treat we found that he did care about was his old Zupreme Naturals pellets, so we really relied heavily on those during this session. Melissa really hadn't been able to handle Bert. Bert had previously, with his first owner, been really affectionate and cuddly like most umbrella cockatoos can be. But Melissa was really intimidated. She'd already had one bite from this bird, and the bird had already lunged at her daughter, kind of bopped her on the nose with the beak. Really terrifying body language, really terrifying sort of random aggression, but we always know it's not really random. So we were really trying to find something that we could use to bond Melissa and Bert together and establish that communication between both of them in a way that was really hands-off. Because in the past, Bert's communication with humans has been very hands-on, very touchy-feely, and we really didn't want to encourage that and lead to even more hormonal behavior. Something that is just really easy to sort of start with when you're working with a new bird and you want to establish that line of communication and like, hey, we're speaking the same language, is honestly just training a spin. We trained it under the perch where Melissa would show a little bit of a treat food under the perch, get Bert to turn halfway around, and then sort of catch his eye on the other side of the perch and lure him forward. Eventually, we were able to fade out that first treat and just kind of use that hand as a prompt to then pull Bert all the way forward where he would get his treat in the front.
Okay. He's a fantastic bird.
He's so good.
You are, I love you.
You're a very sweet bird. Okay, try again. Okay. Just real low. And then once he's turned, catch his eye. Catch his eye. Good. It's really important in these scenarios to kind of like back off and let the bird think a little bit after they understand what you're asking them, which Bert picked up on really quickly. He's such a smart bird. We kind of asked Melissa, like, back off just a little bit and now just let him think, let him feel a little frustrated. But with a cockatoo specifically, and any bird that's learning to learn for the first time, you really don't want them to fail over and over such that they really give up and quit, or in Bert's case, get frustrated and bite. So we wanted to keep the reinforcement rate high enough that he was still willing to work while also pushing him just a little bit to learn like, hey, it's okay to figure things out, to use your brain to problem solve. Stay there. Stay there. Stay there. Prompt him with the other hand. Good. Perfect. Awesome. After we did that with Bert, we needed him to get a little hungrier for what we were going to ask of him later. So we worked with Harlow the Quaker and the cockatiels. We got them out and we started teaching them to spin. It was really fun for the kids. They did a great job. Melissa's son was able to work with Harlow and kind of work on the mechanics of that spin because he had seen Bert do it. And then Melissa's daughter was also able to do that with one of the cockatiels. It was really fun to play with those little birds. After Bert had some time to sort of sit and digest his treats, we decided to work on step up. This is really why Melissa had me out, because she was super intimidated by Bert. The very first step here is we needed to establish some sort of pattern. We got Bert away from his cage and into a separate part of the house. Melissa had established some target training with Bert in our prior consultation, so that was really helpful here. She pulled out a target stick and she sort of established two familiar surfaces. One was the BirdTricks T-stand and the other was a sort of sleeper cage that Bert had used in the past. And she just targeted him between the two surfaces just to kind of show him that like, hey, we're engaging in training and we're using these two surfaces. Also, it established a little bit of reinforcement history on both of those surfaces. I did a few trial step-ups with Bert on my arm, and just to kind of gauge his interest, his discomfort, I was able to kind of feel, sometimes through a bird's feet, you can kind of feel how uncomfortable they are and if they're leaning a certain direction, grabbing on really tight. So I was able to kind of gauge all that, and he seemed really comfortable going between the two surfaces. So I went ahead and had Melissa try. One of the things we used a little bit to our advantage was sort of alluring behavior with Bert. So as soon as Bert was on Melissa coming from one surface going to the other, we made sure to keep the distance really tight and short in the beginning. We showed him the treat, and then he got the treat once he was standing on the next surface. We moved him.
He moved.
On your arm.
Yes.
Let's not make light of that. That was great. I really just wanted to do that to make sure Bert's attention was up and away from her hand a little bit, but I didn't want to build too much frustration. He seemed really fine with his motivation level. Remember, he'd already had a target training session and a session earlier that day of spin, so he wasn't overly motivated for these treats, but he was just right at the right level where he cared about it enough. We did notice, though, a preference for him going from the cage top to the T-stand and not really loving going from the T-stand to the cage. And that's going to be really important in a minute. So Melissa also was sort of peeling, and this is something that people do really, really frequently. They get the first foot on their hand or on their arm, and then they sort of lift up. And that second foot gets peeled off of where it was holding onto previously and set here just because the bird was already bearing weight on this foot. It sort of happens. And Melissa had done that on a few reps, and I was kind of pointing that out, cautioning her. And on the rep where we were going from the T-stand to the cage, remember that wasn't the direction Bert wanted to go. We were towards the end of a training session, and she sort of peeled that foot up. She went to go set him down on the cage to give him the treat, and her hand and body position was just a little bit hunched over him, just enough that it made Bert uncomfortable enough that he did bite Melissa. This is something that, while in the moment, of course, none of us wanted, but it was actually kind of a good thing that we were able to work through something that has happened and that is really common for Bert. And we were able to kind of troubleshoot together what we would do. So immediately following the bite, Melissa did a great job of just not reacting. Obviously it hurt her. She tried to get her finger away, and then she just kind of calmly stood sort of nearby. I went over, assessed the situation, pulled the cage sort of away where Bert couldn't climb off the cage onto the counter or start causing other mischief and be reinforced. We just wanted to keep it super neutral. Melissa tended to herself. I watched Bert, and then we stepped right back into training after that because I really didn't want to end the session on that note. I didn't want to go back into sort of step up training or anything like that, but I did offer for Bert to come onto the T-stand for a treat, to try to do a little bit of a spin, something different, just so that we could end on a different note. And we decided that this was a good time after we had kind of recovered to let Bert have a little bit of a break. After Bert's break, I didn't want to end on, and Melissa also didn't want to end on without practicing a little bit more step up. I went ahead and picked two different surfaces. One was a scale, which he had a lot of reinforcement history with, and it also is shaped more like a T-stand, and the other was his T-stand. And we were able to move him from one to the other and sort of manage it that way and get him to practice a few more step ups with me. And that made everyone really happy and comfortable with the way that the session ended. I would do it like this.
Oh, gotcha. Sideways.
So I'm not going to stick my hand in there in the interest of science anymore. But
Okay. Gotcha.
after that, we got to give Bert a little bit of a bath. He was actually acting very interested in a bath. And so we gave him a bath, and actually he was like so dusty because she hasn't really been able to handle him, get him out of the cage very much. But water is something he really did love. It was just really hard for her to manage. So this was a good opportunity for something that was going to be really reinforcing for Bert, and it was. And he left this like very cute, very cockatoo, just dust puddle under his T-stand. So clearly he needed a bath. He enjoyed it very much. That was a really great way to wrap up our day.
Were you such a good boy for your bath?
And then Melissa and I were able to debrief over dinner to kind of talk about our plan for the next day, talk about what we needed to do going forward, and make a strategy for Bert to be successful and for Melissa to be successful. Going into day 2, we were going to start a little more hands-off. We knew what went wrong with Bert, Melissa was comfortable practicing step up. So we wanted to try just something a little different with that initial really high motivation we have in the morning time. We also kind of both agreed that that old sleeper cage was sort of the wrong tool for the job in terms of getting him into his sleeper cage. He does need to go to a separate room to sleep at night because his cage is sort of in the main living area. So to get the 12 hours of sleep he needs, he does need a sleeper cage, but that other one just really wasn't conducive. The way that the door was super small. The bars weren't that great. It was just something that wasn't going to work very well. Melissa did have another option though that we ended up pulling out and working with, and it was way, way, way better. This is where things start to get really fun and really reinforcing for Bert and Melissa. I wanted Melissa to play a little bit with shaping. So because Bert is an umbrella cockatoo and is a bigger bird than her Quakers, than her cockatiels, you just have a little more time and space where they think about things before they're moving as quickly in a training session as some of those smaller birds. And I wanted her to play around with that a little bit. So the very first thing we did when we introduced this crate, he thankfully went right on top of it and saw it as a perch. The top kind of has a perch bar, and that worked really, really well. The very first thing we did is drop a treat in one of the bowls in the crate for him to just go in on his own. We back up, so the treat comes in, that's a positive reinforcement in the bowl. We take a few steps back, that's a negative reinforcement. He doesn't think we're gonna lock him in there. He has the opportunity on his own to sort of explore, walk, peek his head in, grab that treat, and then come back out, which is exactly what he did. After that, he was sort of on the ground for that first rep because that just was the easiest place to sort of set him. But we did want to move him up to a table because I didn't want, as his motivation waned, him to be able to like crawl on the floor, which is something he's known to do, and be able to walk around the house and be reinforced by other things. So just to eliminate that risk, we put him on top of a table, and that was where we completed the rest of the training session. The next thing we did was we put a treat in sort of the back bowl in the crate to see if he would walk in a little further. And that was just a little bit too much for Bert. So what we ended up doing is we used approximations to get him towards that goal, which was just breaking off smaller pieces of treats, giving him treats for maybe coming down onto the table surface, coming down onto the door, things like that, to get him closer to walking in and feeling comfortable going in and going on that perch to get the treat from the back bowl. I'm gonna lure him in so he knows what direction, but I'm gonna switch the approach here. Okay. Yep, we're gonna come back down. Good job. Good boy. See, I'm having to kind of redirect here a little. We're gonna come down. It's really important, again, like on that first day, to build just enough frustration, but not too much frustration that we lose him or risk him getting aggressive and heightened. So it was just, we want to push him just enough, linger just long enough that he has a chance to think about it, but we also don't want him to fail like more than 2 times in a row. If that third rep, on those first 2 reps, he's failed, we really, really need to try to get something successful in on that third rep, even if it's a little bit of compromise for both of us. We also tried to really watch his body language and anticipate what he needed. This is where shaping really starts to happen. We looked for any little movement towards the door as an opportunity to drop a treat in the bowl to reinforce and him to go all the way in. Then he started learning, which is just the coolest part about birds. He started learning like, wait, I think the cue for them giving me a treat is me poking my head in the door a little bit. And so he would start to kind of go in that direction. He would learn a treat would appear. So this was just him on his own communicating to Melissa that he was able to just peek in and get that treat. It was really important to gauge that just right, where his intention was obviously that he was going in just a little bit, but don't wait too long to give that treat and deliver that reinforcement so that we lose him. So it was really, really critical. Melissa and I worked together to sort of establish when that would happen. I was watching carefully, she was watching carefully, and she really got the hang of it, and so did Bert. This is when we were able to start rewarding for duration. So he started to learn that if he stood on that perch, another treat would appear. So we were careful in the way that we placed the treat in the bowl for him starting to head in. That almost guaranteed that he would go in. And then she would approach with another treat, and it was his choice. He could stay on the perch and receive the next treat, or he could exit. But we weren't closing the door on him yet. I didn't want him to feel trapped at all. I wanted him to trust the process. Then, after we had established a lot of that, she was the one holding Bert's attention. I was the one approximating, closing the door. So together we were able to work in just getting that door closed, and we were able to see that his body language was super calm throughout all of that, and that wasn't going to be an issue. So then Melissa was able to sort of work on both of those things together, delivering the treats, walking around, closing the door, coming back around, opening the door, delivering more treats. All of that worked out really, really well. And it just kind of was really seamless. Bert wasn't as freaked out by it, but had Bert been freaked out, we would have opened the door. We would have let him come back out. Any movement towards that door, we were going to really open that door and allow him to come back out. We weren't going to trap him in there because I wanted this to be really, really positive. There was no reason this had to happen today. We just happened to make a ton of progress because he wasn't that uncomfortable with it. And once he got the hang of what was going on, you could just see they were both doing this sort of communication and dance with one another that really, really seemed to flow. And I think it was just a huge improvement from the day before. That's where we ended things with officially training Bert. We wanted to end on a really high note, and that gave her something really practical that she could start implementing even that night. Now go ahead and go open that door. I don't want him to move towards the door for it to open. I want him to realize it.
Right.
Melissa and I then sat down and got to chat a little bit about our experience, and she shared with me sort of her hopes and dreams, the things that are really challenging about owning a cockatoo, and what her expectations were like coming into all of this and what she got out of it.
He's so smart. That's really the hardest. I knew they were smart, but I definitely underestimated his ability to assess the situation and be like 4 steps ahead of me before I try to do anything with him. Yeah. And he has a big beak.
Yeah. The big beak.
I didn't appreciate how grand of an animal he was actually until we got him. So I love him.
We're pro cockatoo at BirdTricks.
We're still a little scared, but we're still pro cockatoo. I want him to be a happy bird and have fun with training and interacting. Yeah.
Fast forward to today, we are a few weeks out from her consult and she has already made so much progress. He's fully converted onto the chop. He's fully converted onto the pellets. He is still only training for his own pellets, which is just kind of funny to me. He's accepted a few different types of nuts, but he just doesn't do it with as much enthusiasm as he does. So we're just letting it be. That's what motivates him, and that's okay. She has kept up the crating herself. So she has been practicing crating at home so that he goes into his sleeper cage every night. He gets his good 12 hours of sleep. We also have established that on days where this just isn't possible and she knows she's not set up for success, we're not trying right now. So we're not pushing Bert. We really want to make sure that he has the opportunity to say no, but that we're setting up the scenario where he's likely to say yes. She's also continued progressing in Step Up. She's doing a great job. We decided at the end of our session that she was going to look for opportunities to be his Uber driver, which is what that initial session of Step Up was, as we were moving him from one place to the other where he knew he would expect a treat. Right now, that looks like maybe moving him from his cage to a Java tree, or his cage to a scale, or his cage to his sleeper cage, or his sleeper cage to his big cage. Anywhere that Bert is interested in going, Melissa's involving a treat in that process and acting as a little bit of an Uber driver. This is building a lot of trust between her and Bert, and it's making sure that he's being transported in places he wants to go, and we're not falling back into that where are we really pushing him somewhere where he's not interested in going, and therefore setting her up for an unsuccessful interaction and potentially a bite. Melissa has also become a bird trainer in her own home. So she's working with her husband. She's made great detailed videos for her husband for when she's gone. She does work sometimes at nighttime and she's unable to put Bert away in his sleeper cage. And so the whole family's sort of getting involved in that process little by little. Remember, we're setting him up for success. So if we don't think he's going to be successful with whatever interaction it's going to be, I'd rather no interaction happen than a really negative one at this point. So we're pushing Bert just enough. She's having really controlled training sessions where she's engaging him with the crate, she's engaging him with the scale. Really, she made a big push for diet conversion, which has really, really helped his motivation levels. Recently, she was even able to get him to the vet for a checkup. So she was able to get him in his sleeper cage and then take him to the vet for a checkup. And all of that was really, really successful. It was so fun to get to know Bert, to get to know Melissa. I feel like we're great friends now. We had a great time together. We enjoyed bird training. We enjoyed getting to have the conversations about the little nuances of their entire flock. And I am so excited for what's to come in their future. And I can't wait to continue following along their journey.